Hi, I'm Eric Ostro, host of Live at the Lortel. For Season 3, we are focusing on the intersection of arts and advocacy. So many off-Broadway artists give back to their communities. This season, we are giving them the opportunity to speak about how and why they chose the causes they devote themselves to, and how those causes help them make them the people and artists they are today. Good afternoon, everybody. This is a very exciting day at Live at the Lortel. I would like to introduce my co-host, Joy D. Michelle. Hi, Joy.
Hello, dear. How are you?
While our guest today needs no introduction, I thought I'd do a brief one anyway. Miss Linda Lavin has won numerous theater awards, including a Tony Award for a performance in The Magnificent Broadway Bound. She is a 6-time Tony Award nominee and was inducted into the Theater Hall of Fame in 2011. Linda is a 2-time Golden Globe winner and an Emmy nominee for her role as Alice on the 9-year hit TV series Alice. She is currently a series regular on the sitcom Be Positive and can be seen in the Aaron Sorkin feature Being the Ricardos. Linda is a graduate of the College of William and Mary, which recently conferred on her an honorary Doctor of Arts degree, which she endows a theater program. Welcome, my idol of American theater, Miss Linda Lavin.
Oh, thank you very much, Eric.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. You seem so close. I could reach out and touch. It feels so good. And you look beautiful.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
It's funny, you travel the country with your husband. I'm in part-time Miami and New York, and we saw you at the Aventura Performing Arts Center. And then I saw you, I think in 2018 at the Cafe Carlisle with your tribute to Bobby Short, which was something we will talk about later. But you were here to you did the program Alice for 9 years.
9 years.
You became a spokesperson for single mothers raising children and fair wages. And Alice became an icon in all over the world for people speaking out for raising children by themselves and trying to get equal pay for equal work. Can you talk to me a little bit about the advocacy that you've done for that and how Alice has kind of followed you your whole career?
Yes, well, the latter part of that question, the amazing part of the following, that it continues, that people still come up to me and say, I grew up with you. You were the mother I hoped the mother I wanted. I was a latchkey kid. I came home and watched you, or I watched with my family, or women from that time and still now who come up and say, because of Alice, they were imbued with the courage to learn what the issues were, to go back to school, to stay with it, to ask for and to begin to advocate for themselves. Alice represented 80% of all working women in this country. And so many, or I dare say most of us at a certain point in our life need someone to speak for them. And many of these women did not have the voice that I got to have through Alice, and that Alice got to have through being a character on television, which is certainly the most powerful of our media. And so she represented for those women and stood up for and asked for and walked out of the diner in congregant with the needs of working women who were also single mothers, who would come up to me in the street or in restaurants or in diners or anywhere and say, because of you, because of Alice, I felt there was a possibility, a change for me. And it still does go on. But the power of television imbued me with the knowledge that I had a responsibility.
And you took that responsibility so seriously. I mean, I've been doing so much research on you these past 2 weeks. So excited for this. But I love that you reached out, when you got the part, you reached out to Gloria Steinem.
I did. I'd met Gloria Steinem, socially. But once I got this part, because of who she was and what she had established with Ms. Magazine, I called her and told her I was going to play a single mother, a working woman, and I wanted her help for story ideas. And could she get me in touch with women who were writing about these very issues? And she did. Letty Cotton Pogrebin and others who sent me articles or with whom I spoke at that time and took notes so that I could bring to the writers ideas that were cogent, that were current, and could say, this is what we can do. Yes, it's a comedy. And yes, it also serves many other needs. And there's a 10-year-old kid, and we need to talk about him. We need to talk about these other women, 3 women working for a guy who didn't get it. And that was the expression in those years. They don't get it. And so it put into our mouths through Gloria Steinem and the writers she put me in touch with who were writing about these very issues. I mean, then she put me on the cover of Ms. Magazine in, I think it was 1980. It was 3 or 4 years after we went on the air.
That's what my notes say.
Yes. And the headline is about sexual harassment in the workplace.
That's right.
Now, the Me Too movement, we all know, which erupted maybe 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And I go back to 1976, and this is a headline on a national magazine when we just began to learn the language about what was going on and how to respond to it, how to react to it, what to do about it, what the language was, how to take care of ourselves. And it's still going on. And so I was at the cusp of the cutting edge of a revolution for certain. The ERA. And because of Alice, I was invited suddenly to speak at rallies, at labor rallies and ERA marches. And I had never spoken in front of groups before, and I didn't consider myself a political person. But now I began to understand that if you're alive, you're political. If you're breathing, you are political. And certainly it behooved me to find a way to say yes to these invitations. I was terrified. I had been invited to attend and be part of the National Commission on Working Women, who had doubted an honor on me and then named their award the Alice Award. And they gave awards to broadcasters whose main focus in television and radio, broadcasters, producers whose main focus was working women. So they brought me to Washington, and now I was really, really exposed to the issues of and the needs of working women. It was a non-governmental commission, and I was asked to represent, participate, and I got to learn what the issues were by just attending and being included in this incredible organization, which then took their findings to Congress, and which is then why laws began to change and develop and things began to grow in the way that they needed to be attended to. But man, I finally thought, how do I do this? How do I go to Oklahoma and make a speech on the steps of the State House when I've never done this? So I met a fabulous woman named Sally Steenland in Washington who was on the commission, and she started writing for me and helping me to form thoughts into words and to talk to people and make it real and make it come from me, because I was learning from my ignorance. I was becoming knowledgeable about what the issues were. And I thought, one of the things I must do is wear my Alice uniform. That's going to help me.
That was my next question.
Yeah, was it? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it just was. I know that you went to one of the rallies, and I didn't know that it was all of them, but you didn't know what to say or what to do. You'd never been. And then you put your Alice uniform on, and the crowd went crazy.
Because she spoke for me. That was all I had to do. That's right. And that was at a big rally at the Washington Monument where I first did that. It was a huge labor rally. It was Labor Day. And Pete Seeger was on the stage behind me, for God's sake. I mean, I was in the presence of icons of revolutions. It occurred to me that if I just showed up in the uniform, that would help me. I didn't need to say a damn thing.
Yeah.
All I needed to do was, there she was. She was showing up, and they knew who she was.
Yeah.
And it helped me so much to identify and to reach out, which is all about what I love doing, is to, reaching out and connecting. And
of course.
So it began a brand. She changed my life. The character and that job changed my life big time.
As well as ours.
I want to go back for a second. I know that I'm a kid of television, so I remember you on Barney Miller. and going,
Yes.
oh my goodness. And then when you went on to Alice, do you think that the kernel or the seed of wanting to make an impact with your art was already there, or did that develop as you did this role?
The latter. It absolutely developed. As I say, I never thought of myself I didn't know myself as a political person. In junior high school, we did a mock presidential debate, and I represented somebody whose name I'm blocking now, who was from Illinois. And my father helped me write a speech because he knew who this guy was. And, that was about as political as it got. I didn't study politics, and I knew who I was, and I knew who my family was. And I knew that we loved Roosevelt, and we all wept when he died. I was maybe 5 years old, but I knew who we represented as Jewish Caucasians in the 40s and 50s in Portland, Maine. But my life was not about politics. My life was about performing and about developing and studying a theater. And I never even thought I'd get into television because those jobs were very hard for me to get in New York in the 60s. When I came here to New York, I was not the type who was being hired. They were hiring all very young. I was young, but I wasn't thin enough and I wasn't blonde enough. Let's put it that way. Yeah. And I was called ethnic. It was a tough time. So it never was a dream of mine to be in television. I just wanted to be in the theater. I wanted to be in musicals. I wanted to be a great actor and a great actress at the time was what we called ourselves. And I just wanted to be on stage. And so this role and the Barney Miller role that you've just brought up was also a way of politicizing, because I began to learn, as you do with every role that you create. You either do the research or you learn as you go along who it is you're playing and where they lived and how they lived and what time they lived in and what the life was around them. The best thing I ever learned from European history studies was I wanted to meet those people who had changed the world. And I wanted to go to the places in the world and travel in the world to see where the Medicis had created all that they had made happen. But I didn't want to learn the dates, and I didn't want to learn about wars, and I didn't want to have to spout out and spit back all the facts that were being preached to us and lectured to us in history classes. I wanted to know the condition of the world so that I could be a better actor. As a student, I was lousy, but as a young person and in need of an artistic education, I was absolutely dedicated. So the idea of, becoming more responsible as a member of a culture and a community and a civilization, that has come through the work, through the characters, and certainly through Alice, for sure.
So let's talk about your Broadway debut, which was Family Affair. Yep. Which we can talk a little bit about one of your mentors and the person who kept pulling you back into shows, Mr. Hal Prince, who you had this incredible working and professional relationship with. And he loved you and you loved him, and he just kept putting you in shows. But I was reading these articles about you auditioning over and over for the same part. You kept going back and they kept saying, no, you're too ethnic, and no, you're too this. We need a blonde. And then the next day you showed up in a blonde wig.
I did. And that was for Hal. That was for Superman. We need a blonde.
Okay. Yeah.
And I went to my friend Sylvia Miles and I said, can I borrow your wig? And she got jealous. She said, what, they need a blonde? And I said, well, that's the point. Yeah. So she gave me the wig and I went on stage and I sang that song that I ended up singing on Broadway. They made me learn it. And it's a very difficult song. It has 87 verses, all kinds of lyrics that are hard to learn. And I sang it. When I walked on as a blonde, they all made audible sounds. And I pretended that I didn't know what they were talking about. I was a blonde. We weren't going to discuss it. And so it turned out that in the show, I didn't have to be a blonde at all, but I did get the role then. They made me audition for that show 4 or 5 times.
But
I thought you had to get paid after a certain time. I was expecting a check the next time.
after the sixth audition. So
Really?
you started off in Family Affair, and Hal picked you out of the chorus to talk about that a little.
I was in the chorus of a Family Affair, Eric, and we were in Philadelphia. It was my first Broadway show. I had auditioned for that show, got in the chorus, singing chorus, not the dancing chorus. We were in Philadelphia in running, and the director at the time became incapable of continuing with the show. And we didn't know anything, but one night I was at the phone booth backstage, and this dynamo walked in through the stage door right past me at the phone booth. And it was Hal Prince. And this is 1960, 61. And he pointed to me. I was on the phone, and he pointed to me and he said, "You're terrific. I'll see you later." And we were all called on stage, the company, and the producer introduced us to Mr. Prince and said Mr. Prince would be taking over the direction of the show. And we were all to report for work the next day at 10 a.m., as we did. And when we did, Hal made a speech. You know, we were all young then. This was his first directorial. He had produced many shows by then. And he said what he was going to do and how he was going to change things. And then he came up to me and he said, "I've got a part or two for you." And he kept giving me parts. I ended up with singing solos and 4 separate characters in that show and got $5 a piece for each one of them. So that was big time.
Which was a lot of money. That was good.
It was a
good
lot
money
of money
back then. Yeah.
The pay was $125 a week, so you can imagine.
Yeah.
And chickens were 29 cents a pound. So let's talk about how things have changed. But he just, gave me all the support, and more than support, a real commitment to my belief that it was possible for me. He made me believe that, I could do whatever he told me to do. And we went to Broadway, and the show was not a success, but my family came and got to see me do solos on stage. I sang a solo with Larry Kurt and went back and forth, just changing costumes and wigs and being all kinds of different people in the evening, which is what I love doing. When I came to New York in the 60s, the major part of the off-Broadway entertainment were reviews. And they were what turned out to be Saturday Night Live. They were sketches and songs, and that's what we did. I went from one to another, off-Broadway, one-nighters, maybe they lasted a week. You learned a lot of material, and it ended with the biggest success, which was the Mad Show. And that was at the time that I went to audition for Hal and got into a Superman. I wrote a letter to Hal with a comic book. I went out and found a Superman comic book, and I went into a photo booth and took pictures of myself with a green fedora hat looking like Lois Lane. And I slapped these photos all over the comic book, and I sent the comic book to him. And he wrote back, because I had known him and I had met him, and he had put me on stage that way in a Family Affair. He wrote back and he said, "This is a brilliant audition." He said, "But you can't be Lois Lane." And then he called me and he said, "I've got a part for you, but you have to come audition." But how was this? When I was out of work a few years after I met him, and seriously out of work for a long period of time and working in temporary jobs and getting unemployment, I went to his office. I had the guts to go, and he received me in his office, and I said, "I need a job." And he said, "I'll put you in She Loves Me," which was running at the time. And he said, "Meet me at the theater tonight." And I watched the show, and he was going to put me in within a couple of weeks. I guess the show was ready to close, and I never made it in. It closed. But that was Hal Prince. That was how much he loved me, and he loved actors. And he would, Hal Prince wrote back to everyone who ever wrote him a note or a letter. And he did it that day. He answered you. He reached out. I mean, when you talk about connection, there was nobody more committed to that kind of generosity of sharing himself and reaching out, because maybe, you never know who's at the other end, And he was at the end of that kind of giving. there's nobody like him, and there never will be, and there never has been. And I owe him so much and miss him so much, as do we all.
That's so
And you
beautiful.
continued your relationship with him. I mean, you call him up and say, who's doing Candide? And you said, I'm doing it. And he said, okay, you're doing it.
No,
right.
I did. I called and I said, who's playing the old lady? Because he had asked me to do it once before. It was going to start, I think, in Toronto. And I was going to do it, but that didn't ever happen. And then when I saw he was doing Candide, oh my God, that was a role that my mother and my sister and I used to just get hysterical singing around the house. Mm-hmm. So I knew that aria, and he hadn't yet cast it. So timing is everything, It was just when he asked me to do Carol Burnett's show, I always felt that we were socially close, we were like family. I knew Hal when he was dating his wife, Judy, and we used to double date. So we go way back before the kids were born and to our very young times. He took me and my husband, Steve, he and Judy took us on a yacht to the Croatian coast. He took me to China with some other friends. There's nobody more generous and more exciting to be with, more interested in the world. And I left this town for 15 years when I had to move to California to find work, and it turned into Alice. But we always kept in touch, and we were family. There's no doubt about it.
You definitely have a lot of moxie in terms of going into his office and saying, hey, I want to talk to you about this. That same moxie propelled you into having your own production company and directing. Can you talk about what that was like at that time to be a woman forming your own production company?
Sure. Well, I don't know what the inspiration was or who the inspiration was, but I knew it was happening. I knew that the first movie for television that I ever did was about a single mom with Christy McNichol as my daughter. And I was directed by Nancy Malone, who was a great actor and became a great director. And so it was time. And while I was doing Alice, my relationship was with CBS. People were doing it. Men were doing it. And they had their own production companies. They owned their own machinery. They owned campers and trailers and rented them back to the studio. I thought, that's a good idea. So I did that. You learn, if you keep your eyes and ears open, so I began to realize that I made a commitment with CBS, or they offered me one, to make a movie a year for them. I realized that what I wanted to do was have control of that material. I wanted to develop material with writers. What an opportunity, to start from scratch, from an idea. And I said, I got it. I got that to happen. And it was called Lavin Entertainment Group, LEG Inc. I think my first corporation was Big Deal. Then I changed it to Lavin Entertainment Group. And I had an office and I had a development person. I hired a young woman who went after the material. But once you hang your shingle out, people come to you with ideas and pitches. And all of a sudden you get to listen to ideas, say yes or no, and then you're in production. I worked with a wonderful group of producers before I formed my own company who urged me to do it. The Finnegans, who became very good friends. And I saw how it was done. And I knew I would love it. Directing Alice, I did 2 episodes a year. I wanted to direct. I wanted to learn how to do that. I knew I could work with actors, but I didn't know the technique. It was a 4-camera technique that was started by Lucy and Desi. And we're still using that technique to this day. Mm-hmm. And it's very complicated because you're editing as you shoot. It was nerve-wracking, and I was also in the show, but they would write me light that week if I were directing. And so I got to join the Directors Guild, and I was a director, and I was working with the company of actors that I'd been close to. So it caused me to be, let's use the word, politically, conscious, compassionate about working with actors. And now you're the director. So we took some pictures of me with a megaphone, and made some jokes about it and And there I was directing, but everybody knew what to do on that show anyway. But it gave me a chance to learn a technique that I'm still working in on Be Positive. We're working on a 4-camera show. But the production company, I loved it. And I made a movie a year. And I found a woman on 60 Minutes one night who was a nurse. Her name was Joy Eufema. And she was a nurse in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And she was the only nurse in the hospital who was taking care of the dying patients. Nobody would go into their rooms. And the doctors didn't want to deal with them. And the nurses were afraid and unskilled. And she had a feeling, a passion, a commitment. And she was interviewed on 60 Minutes. And I looked in the phone book, which we had in those days, or I called information, and I found her, and she picked up the phone. And it was Sunday night. It was right after 60 Minutes. And I said, "This is Linda Lavin, and I want to do your story on television." And she said, "Are you kidding? Is this really you?" And, that doesn't happen anymore. Those stories are already sold by the time they make it onto television. But
that's right.
It's a matter of, as you say, Joy, it's chutzpah, it's moxie, and it's good luck. It's great timing. It was just that wonderful. If you keep your heart, your possibilities open, and you go for it, you never know what that could happen. So it happened. I went and made rounds with her in the hospital. I hired a writer, and we did a story. It's called A Matter of Life and Death. We did movies for television in the 80s that they're making features out of now, but we were the cutting edge. Television really went to those places in a risky time. They didn't want to do a story about dying people, and they did it. And it's a beautiful movie.
I got to look that up on YouTube for sure. But, you've worked with some of the most celebrated playwrights that have lived today. Nikki Silver, Donald Margulies, Richard Greenberg, my friend Charles Bush. Have written a memorable and award-winning roles that they say, as they were writing, your voice was in their head as these characters were coming out. I mean, you've done collected stories, 4 times now?
Yes, you're right. You're right. Yes.
And I love that they say that, when I talked to Charles about The Allergist's Wife, and I was asking him questions about his writing, and he said it was Linda Lavin's voice in my head that I would go then and sit down and write it in her voice. And then recently, which I went to, you guys switched parts, and it was what a night!
Yeah.
What a
that
night!
Was so fun,
what an incredible night! Oh, I was sitting in the first row. I'll never forget it.
Were you? That's
what a great night,
Eric.
For the Actors Fund. It was incredible.
He finally got to do it. I said, "You have to do this."
Oh, he's wanted to play that part since he wrote it. Yeah.
Let's face it. Yes.
Yeah, of course. But what is that like with the process of being in a new play like The Lions and Collected Stories and Tales of the Allergist's Wife, and to work so closely with these magnificent playwrights of our time?
To me, there's nothing better, Eric, than working in the same room with the writer. And let's face it, it started for me with Neil Simon. And Neil was extremely attentive. My great story about Neil is that we did the reading for the Schuberts, the table read of that script, before we went into rehearsal. And I had one scene, but I was just coming off Alice, and I knew that I wanted to play that role. I read for it and got it. And here we were reading it. And
Excuse me to interrupt. Do you think that he was hesitant about giving you the role because of Alice? Oh, okay.
I do. Good for you. That's kind of psychic of you, because I had to meet him. It wasn't offered to me, but it was dangled. A meeting was set up, and I met him at the Beverly Hills Tennis Club. I got all dressed up in a 1940s outfit with the kind of shoes that our bubbies used to wear and dresses like that. And I went and met him. He was in tennis togs, and I must have looked like a crazy person. And we sat and had coffee, and I said to him, "So do you have a hesitation because it would be Alice playing your mother?" And he didn't answer me. And I said, "On the other hand, it would be Alice playing your mother. You talk about moxie, it's like, what have I got to lose? We're talking about tushes and seats here, folks.
Yeah.
And I'm just coming off a 9-year series. Maybe people would like to come and see me. And I desperately wanted to come back to the theater to be seen as someone other than Alice. That's the hope, is that you can go on and be an actor and not only be a character for the rest of your life that you've been so familiar with people. That was a bad syntax that people are so familiar with. So he said, I think I shamed him with that. And I said, do you want me to read for it, Neil? And because I will. And he said, well, that would be wonderful if you would read for Jean Sachs. So I said, of course I will. So I went to somebody's house in Bel Air. I don't know who was living there at the time, either he or Jean. And I read for them and they said, we'll see you in August. You got it. So, I knew reading it that I knew how to do that woman. Now we're at the table. We're at the table reading it a few months later. And I only have one scene. And Neil comes up to me after the reading and he says, I'm going to write you another scene. I want to see her when she was happy. And he and Manny Eisenberg had sent a note back and forth. This is a famous story. It was in the Times when Neil died. And Manny said, and Neil said, I know, you don't have to say, I'm going to change it. And he changed it to that 12-page monologue or whatever, how many pages that was that he wrote for me.
The one where you dance with
George Raft.
Right, with George Raft.
George Raft, and then Jonathan Silverman, 20 years old, played my son. By the way, Jonathan Silverman just came to see me. He's now, what is it, 30-some years later with his wife. I played my nightclub act at the Catalina's Jazz Club in Hollywood 3 weeks ago, and he came to see me. And I have not seen him since we danced on stage at the Barrymore.
I'll never forget seeing that show and seeing you and seeing, as a little boy, I really didn't know my booby passed away way before me, but my mother and father turned to me and said, there she is.
Oh, Eric.
It was the oil on the table.
Yeah.
And to our audience, you can YouTube. There's a scene from the Tony Awards where you see Linda and Jonathan play that scene, and it is a piece of art.
Thank you. It's a beautiful piece of writing, and we loved acting it, loved performing it. And it's got a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful joke. It comes from a very passionate place in her history. She tells him about seeing the Statue of Liberty for the first time.
Yeah.
Can I tell it?
Yeah, please. It's a great joke.
She talks about this table and what it means to her, and that it was her grandmother's table, and what it was like for them to come over, and how they came from Europe and Eastern Europe, and how
scared they were.
Terrified they were. Can you imagine? She says, and my grandmother was a little bit of a thing. And when they pulled into the harbor and they looked up and they saw the Statue of Liberty, and I said, and when they took one look at her, you know what they said? And he says, we're glad to be in America. And she says, no, they said, they took one look at that nose and said, this is not a Jewish woman. We're going to have trouble here. We're going to have trouble again.
That is a perfect Neil Simon joke.
And that's the way Neil Simon wrote. He took you and he broke your heart. He opened it open and he cracked it open, and you're bleeding and crying. And then he had the joke to lift you, to show you that it's humor and the capacity for humor to laugh at ourselves that keeps us going and that saves us. So, yes. So to work with him, of course, I always wanted him to laugh in the room, and he didn't always. So, and then he wrote me a wonderful joke in that play, and I was the only one who laughed. The director laughed, I laughed, Jonathan laughed. And when we did the joke that night, it didn't work, and he cut it the next day. And I said, oh, give me another chance. And he said, no, it's not you. He said, the joke doesn't work. And he was that insightful and that smart and that, generous to an actor to not make you do it and make you feel like it was your fault. I wish that were more prevalent. I work in television now, and they're just desperate to make every joke work, but they do a lot of rewriting too. God bless them. But anyway, You talked about working with living writers. To be in the room with Nikki Silver, to be in the room with Richard Greenberg, to be in the room with Charles Bush, and where the writing is vital. They've done it. They've sat in a room all by themselves. They've imagined whoever it is they thought was doing it. And now you're doing it. And the sense of responsibility to the writer is huge. And the best of them always try to relieve you from that. They always say, don't worry about me. I'm just here. We're going to work together. You don't have to please me. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't imagine what I'm thinking, or, use your imagination, your skills, your gifts. They say this. The great writers say this to the actor. And then what they say is, you showed me more than I knew when I was writing it. And that's the generosity of great writers. And those are the writers I've gotten to work with. Donald Margulies, to be in a room and create together and to be able to say, is this working? Is it me? Is there some way to ask the questions, to have a conversation with a writer and a director while you're creating something? What's better than that? Because when you get a play that is written by someone not alive anymore, the thing is in stone and you got to make it work. And you feel the responsibility to that, of course, because other people have worked on it and made it work. Wouldn't it be great to have Shakespeare in the room and say, I don't know, this doesn't tell me what this means. Help me understand this so I can make it work. Wouldn't it be great? I tell you, it's my happiest. And then to hear Nikki Silver's voice, which could shatter glass, his voice screaming out.
Yeah. I was his assistant for a year. So yeah.
You were?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can still hear it today.
Oh my God. You got
hear
the tone, Miss Lavin, the tone.
But the Lions was a hysterically funny play.
Oh my God, yes.
Heartbreaking as well.
Yes.
Cakewalk was still, it's one of those evenings that you go to the theater that you will never forget as long as you live.
Really?
You embodied Lillian Hellman with your impediment work and the young man that you were playing with on stage. I will never forget this evening in the theater as long as I live. You inhabited Lillian Hellman. Obviously, I'd never met her or seen her, but in my mind, you are that for that evening. And it was,
thank you, Eric.
It was incredible. Was that a great experience?
Well, it was once Mike came along. Oh. Once Mike Nichols came along. Well, yeah, it sure was. And he knew her. Mm-hmm. So, he came to see it when I was out of town in North Carolina with it. And he knew her so well. He came in and came on board, changed a lot of things, and gave me a sense of belonging that he could always give an actor. He was remarkable. And he gave me a sense of belonging and a sense that I was absolutely the person to do it. He worked very hard on it. I loved working with him. He was so much fun. Mike was a director who always made you feel that you were the only actor who could do what you were doing. Wow. Which Hal did too. That's a very rare gift, when a director makes you feel there's nobody else that deserves this part better than you.
Whenever we talk to artists that have worked with the great Mike Nichols and the great Hal Prince, they say the same thing, that you are the only artist in the room at that time and that place. And
isn't that something?
How wonderful. I remember I was sitting behind Sharon Stone and Calvin Klein. We were in the second row. They were sitting in front of us. I just will never forget that evening of the theater.
Wow. Wow, really? I'm thrilled to know that. I'm also glad to know that they came and saw me work. Yeah. I've never met either one of them.
They loved it.
That's nice. Thank you. I'm so moved that you felt that way. Thank you.
You speak so generously about directors, and I should say other directors because you yourself are a director, and how they've given back. But you've given back so much as well. Can you talk about the organization that you'd started, helping young women, theater, and that whole experience?
Sure. I moved to Wilmington, North Carolina, because I was producing a movie that I developed called The Secrets from the Rose Garden. It starred, I was in the movie along with Mary Tyler Moore and Shirley Knight. It was then that I moved to North Carolina and stayed. I fell in love with Wilmington. And after a while, I gave some master classes. There was a lot of theater in Wilmington. It's a home of one of the oldest community theaters in the country. It has an opera house, a lot of theater, a lot of theater companies, and a film studio. So there's a lot of talent in town. And I decided to give acting classes and offer myself up as a director. So I did a gender-bending production of As You Like It with all Brazilian jazz. I set it in Rio and the jungle, and it was damn good. I was loving being in this community. And I decided, I don't know how, to start a foundation and to give something to the community, which had given so much to me. It was a time in my life, Joy, when I wanted to move out of the wings, waiting in the wings for someone to do something for me or give something to me or move over so that I could take that place. It was time for me to stop taking or waiting for something to be given me. It was time for me to give back. It happened when I moved to Wilmington, and that was 1995. I have a friend named Brenda Curran, who's a wonderful actor. She became a teacher and an exponent of a process of working with young girls. And I mean by that in the at-risk ages between 9 and 13, when girls who are full of energy and piss and vinegar and attitude and opinion and energy start to be squelched by the institutions and by the society, which goes as small as the family and as large as the federal government. Mm-hmm. And she started this working here in New York with young girls in a theater model program to start them expressing who they were, what they come from, what they wanted to say. And I was very interested. I took a class with her for one hot summer at NYU. We both went back to school to learn how to do this. And I started this foundation in Wilmington. And we went to the school system in Wilmington, to the middle school system, and said, will you give us a room for the summer? And they said, we'll give you more than that. We'll give you a room and we'll give you the wherewithal to do it for 8 weeks. And they said, and we'll pick some kids for you. There'll be, I think there were at least a dozen girls, maybe more. I'm not remembering this. Brenda would remember. Did I say her name? Brenda Curran. Mm-hmm. She's still doing this work somewhere in the country, or she travels to do it. And I said, will you come and do this with me? Because I have no idea how to do this. And she came and moved in with me. And we started this work one day on a Monday, with all these girls sitting in a circle. And we called it a theater program because if you called it raising your self-esteem, nobody would come. If you couched it in anything that sounded intellectual or in any way possibly shaming, that would not be a good thing. So we said it was a theater model program, and there would be a show at the end of this 8-week period. And she taught me how to do this work. And this work is structured work, and it gets each girl to tell their stories. And these kids would come in on a Monday after drive-by shootings all weekend. Mm-hmm. These kids were living in very dangerous places and in very impoverished situations. And we spent the day with them 5 days a week. We were going to do a show, and we didn't know it was all going to be on them to come up with the kind of show, what stories, what songs. I brought a keyboard in. We got costumes. One of them wanted to be a Muslim woman. She was African American. She came up. I said, what are you going to be in the show? She said, a Muslim. And she said, it Muslim. And I said, what is a Muslim woman? She said, I don't know. And she said, I just like what they wear. I said, well, let's do some work on it. And so that was, the fact that they felt safe enough to talk about the dream and not know what the dream really was, but to be attracted to something that they thought they could be. So we were going to do a talk show and everyone was going to entertain. One girl got up and did poetry. Unbelievable. They sang, they danced. And I, of course, played the keyboard. God forbid you should sing anything not in the key of C, because that's what I play in. And, and their parents came in and we did a show at the end of those 8 weeks. And it kept going. And then we started training the teachers in Wilmington to do this work. And we kept it going for about 3 years. And I kept fundraising for it. So it was called What Girls Know. And then we changed it to Girlfriends. And I've still met people years later who would say, I was in that group, or a mother who would say, my daughter was in that group, whose lives were, if not changed, they were altered by being in a place where they were encouraged to be them, all that they could be, to be themselves, to be vocal, to be artistic, to be expressive, to be true, to be authentic. So it changed my life. I think the best part of philanthropy, if that's the word for what it is we do through our activism, the best part of it is that it's completely selfish. It's I whose life has changed. I get so much out of it. I know people say that, and I think they really mean it when something good is given them. It's true. I got an enormous amount of hope out of that adventure.
I can see it lights you up.
You're talking about how you help them to dream. What's next in your on the chapter of Linda Lavin in your dream? What do you wish for next for you?
Well, Joy, I've given up dreaming about the future. I'm so grateful for the day. But I will say I certainly have small hopes and wishes. Aging has had some big challenges for me lately, but I have just started doing my nightclub act again. And on June 27th, I will be at Birdland on a Monday night at 7 p.m. doing my nightclub act with my band, with Billy Stritch and Aaron Weinstein, the violinist.
And your husband?
And my husband is no longer my drummer. No.
Oh, he's not?
No, he's gone on to other things. He's not.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yes, I know. It was very special for me to have him there. It'll be Daniel Glass, who's a wonderful drummer here. And
But you do have Billy Stritch.
I have Billy Stritch, and I have an album that, of course, was released just as the pandemic was started called Love Notes. It's on iTunes and all the platforms, but we're going to do a re-release on the 27th of June. So Joy, that's in my near future. And I would like to travel a little bit more now that things have opened up. We have a wonderful life. We live in California now on a lake. And we have 2 funny dogs. We have good friends and new neighbors and a simple life. And I don't know if the Be Positive is going to be picked up again or not. And I'm all right either way. I loved the job. I love doing film. I loved it. I loved being in the Ricardos. I loved working with Aaron Sorkin. He's an extraordinary director and writer.
Loved seeing you in it. And the woman that you played, didn't she end up being? She was a writer on I Love Lucy, but
she was the head writer.
She was working for Alice, right?
She was the head, and they didn't know that when they offered me the part.
Which is incredible, unbelievable,
incredible circles.
Life
comes around, and you get to play somebody that you knew and kind of find a way into that person that you didn't really know very well, but that you worked with for 7.5 years. She was the head writer on Alice. And so, and I loved that. And I love working in film, but I don't have any big future plans because it doesn't make sense to me to make, that expression, make plans and God laughs. I make a plan to travel, and the next thing I know, I've got a job. So I really love living in the moment. And the moment is brilliant for me right now and serene. There's a real comfort in my life right now that I'm really enjoying.
Well, I can't wait to see. I hope you come back to the theater in somehow or some way.
Thank you.
That for me, seeing Linda Lavin on stage is what I live for. So,
thank you, Eric. Well, come and see me at Birdland.
And I'll see you at Birdland. Yes, of course.
That's a very stage experience. I really love doing it.
Your nightclub act and Love Notes is a wonderful. You can get that on iTunes or wherever you download your music. Linda sings some incredible standards and some new music as well.
Yes.
With the incredible Billy Stretch. During the pandemic, her and Billy would do Wednesdays with Billy and Linda. I think it was at 3:00.
It was.
We all really looked forward to 3:00 on a Wednesday because it was an hour out of our day that we could watch these two artists sing and play. And you can tell the love between you two.
Oh, yes. Thank you,
Linda,
Eric.
this has been a dream for me, and I know for Joy as well.
Thank you.
To meet you as in person as can be.
Exactly.
Is a dream come true.
You honored me so with everything you said and your feelings, and Joy with your caring, wonderful questions. Thank you so much for the opportunity to show off. I've enjoyed it very, very much.
Well, it's been our honor to have you. That's our show, ladies and gentlemen. Next week, Joy and I will talk to the wonderful Jennifer Simard. Jennifer is a Tony Award nominee, 4-time Drama Desk Award, 3-time Drama League Award, and Lucille Lortel Award nominee with numerous off-Broadway credits. And on Monday, May 2nd, Joy and I will interview writer, actor, performance artist, comedian, and elected representative of Koreatown, Los Angeles, Christina Wong. Christina was nominated for a 2022 Lucille Lortel Award for her solo show, Christina Wong, Sweatshop Overlord, which premiered at New York Theater Workshop and which has received a New York Times Critics Pick. Information about all of our upcoming guests, as well as how to attend our online recordings, can be found on our website, liveathelortel.com. Thank you for joining us today. It's been a dream come true for me to see Linda Lavin right in my face here with Costa Rica behind her. Book your tickets to see a show now. Go see Linda at Birdland. Go see a Broadway show. Go see something off Broadway, ladies and gentlemen. It's a wonderful being back in the theater. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Thank you, Linda Lavin.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Joe. All the best. Be well.
Thank you. This podcast is brought to you by the Lucille Lortel Theater. Live at the Lortel is produced by George Forbes, executive producer yours truly, and associate producer Jeffrey Schubart. Press is provided by Sin Gogolak, GoGo Public Relations. And special thanks to Nancy Hurwitz, Alana Canty Samuel, Mara Levinus, Carla Liriano, and Ellen Chan. Live at the Lortel sound engineer and mixer is Brian Falk at Abacus Entertainment. Thank you so much for listening.